Good morning. I'd like to welcome everyone here to Grove City Community of Christ, and those of you on Zoom, if the internet's working, hopefully they're up there. A beautiful day, finally. We can say it's a beautiful day. Most of you know I have two daughters, Kelly and Gretchen. And my younger daughter, Gretchen, and her husband this past fall decided to buy a school bus that had been renovated into a camper. And they decided at this point in their life, for whatever reason, they thought it was a good time. They're going to pull their second grader out of school. They're both teachers, so they could homeschool, or in this case, bus school, and take this long trip out west. Go to as many national parks, state parks as they can. Well, before they left, my daughter knows that Grandma and Grandpa and Aunt Kelly would have grandkid withdrawal for them being gone so long. So she said, Mom, is there a time maybe that you and Dad and Kelly could fly out and meet us for a little while? And I said, well, yeah, sounds good. So, we looked at dates, and I came up with some dates that would be good. And they don't have an exact route planned out, but she had a general idea where she might be at the time that I gave her these dates. So she goes, how about Sequoia National Park? She knows I love trees. So she says, Sequoia National Park, the big trees. I go, yeah. Well, I'm automatically thinking redwoods. When I hear big trees, I think of redwoods. I didn't do my research before I went, which is crazy. I kind of did it backwards. The only thing I was worried about was the temperature. So every day before we went, I kept checking what's the temperature in the town of Three Rivers, because we rented an Airbnb in this little town called Three Rivers. And the temperature was going to be in the upper 50s, lower to mid 60s. I thought, it's a lot better than Ohio in February. So, okay, this will be great. So, we flew out and went to the house, and the house was only 20 minutes from the entrance to the park. I thought, this is great. I don't know what I was thinking. I thought, I know what I was thinking. I thought we were going to drive through the entrance and there'd be the trees. Wrong. So the first day we went, we drove through the park, the entrance to the park, and there was a sign that said 20 miles to the big tree forest. I thought, okay, that doesn't seem too bad. However, again, I didn't do my research. Let me give you a little bit of background here. The redwoods are the tallest trees in the world, and they thrive in coastal climates. So they are found in Northern California along the Pacific coast. I didn't even know the sequoias were a type of tree. The sequoias are the largest trees in the world, and they thrive in alpine regions. So guess what? We were driving 20 miles up the mountains. We couldn't go much more than 20 miles an hour, and that was probably pushing it sometimes on the hairpin curves. So Cameron, if you could bring up. So we started seeing scenes like this. You can go to the next one. After we'd driven a little while, my husband started saying, I don't see any big trees. I don't see any big trees. You know how when your kids were little and they go, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Well, that's how I felt. I don't see any big trees. I thought, okay. Yeah, there's a few little trees here, but no big trees. He was right. So then, after a long ways going up, we finally got, after over 6,000 feet higher and 30 degrees temperature lower, we made a curve around, and we came to a site like this. Now, the past year, I remember hearing about the fires in California, and it didn't register where they were. California. And I remember watching the news one night, and you know how they always give you a lead in, and the guy says, "Coming up, saving one of America's treasures from the fire." And then it went to commercial. So I'm sitting there thinking, okay, a museum, some famous person's house or something, I wonder what it is. When it came back, it was the sequoia trees. Well, at that point, we hadn't made this trip, this plans for this trip, so sequoia did not register in my mind. But it showed pictures of volunteers and rangers wrapping the trunks of the sequoia trees with the flame retardant material. So I think there's another one like that. So my heart kind of just went, when I saw this. I thought, maybe my husband's right. We're not going to see any giant trees. But we went a little bit farther, and then we saw this. I felt like I was in a fairyland. It's hard to imagine by looking at that, but we started seeing the huge trees. Well, our goal was to get to the General Sherman. The General Sherman is the largest tree on Earth by volume. Now, most trees, trunks will be large at the bottom, and as they get taller, they get smaller at the top, or they all branch out. The sequoias are almost as large at the top as they are at the bottom. Could I have my guys stand in their spots right now? I want you to look. Now, I've got 4 guys that I've asked to stand here. These 4. The General Sherman is 36 feet in diameter. So if you could imagine the trunk encompassing almost this whole room and continuing 275 feet in the air. Thank you, guys. You can just kind of click through a couple of these. That's my grandson who's 6'4", and me. We kind of look a little small there, don't we? That's me down in the, whatever you want to call that down there. I could have gone inside and pitched a tent, I think. I had to get the grandkids in, of course, And that's our whole family. There's 9 of us standing there, and we hardly make a dent in the bottom of that tree. Thanks, Cameron. Okay, I could stand up here and show you 100 pictures, which I'm not, of those trees, and I could talk on and on about, what they look like, which I'm not going to do that either. But it's something that you have to see for yourself to believe. And so we come to today's theme, believe. As Missy said, she read part of the scripture today, and I will finish it. But before I do, I want to ask you a question. When you hear Jesus' disciple's name of Thomas, what's the first thing you think of? Doubting Thomas, exactly. Unless I see the mark of the nails in his hands and put my finger in the mark of the nails and my hand in his side, I will not believe. So Missy read where Jesus had come into the room the first time. and Thomas wasn't there. So now I'm going to continue. Now Thomas, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, and put my finger where the nails were, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." And then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here, see my hands? Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe." Thomas said to him, "My Lord and my God." Then Jesus told him, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." I think Thomas gets a bad rap. Yes, he was a pessimist, but he was a loyal and faithful follower of Jesus. In John chapter 11, we read the story of Lazarus. We've heard these stories in the weeks before now. Jesus and the disciples had just escaped from Jerusalem and an angry crowd wanting to stone them when Martha and Mary sent word that Lazarus was sick. Now remember, this is the same Mary who washed Jesus' feet with the expensive perfume and used her hair to wipe them off. So you know that these are people that Jesus loved and with whom he was close. The disciples did not want Jesus to go back to Jerusalem, did not want him to go back to Bethany because it was too close to Jerusalem. They were afraid and convinced he would be caught and killed. But after several days, Jesus made up his mind to go. It is at this point that Thomas spoke up. This is where we meet him for the first time in all the Gospels. Verse 16 says, "Then Thomas, who was called the twin, said to the rest of the disciples, 'Let us also go, that we may die with him.'" Now that's pessimistic, and that's typical for Thomas. But he loved Jesus so much that he would rather die with him than live without him. So while it is pessimistic, it's also a heroic pessimism. He could see nothing but disaster ahead. He was convinced that Jesus was heading straight for a stoning. But if that's what the Lord was determined to do, Thomas was grimly determined to go with him. You have to admire his courage. And he must have been an example of strength to the rest of the disciples because they did all go to Bethany with Jesus. It's easy to be critical of Thomas, but try to imagine what it would have been like just days after Jesus had died. The disciples had just witnessed a horrific scene. Their best friend, teacher, leader, and Lord had been crucified. They had to be feeling crushed, lost, and scared. They're hiding out in a locked room for fear of the Jews finding them. And then Jesus shows up in their midst saying, "Peace be with you." I'm not so sure I'd be feeling peace at that moment. I'm pretty sure I'd be in shock and probably not believe what I was seeing. And yet, we're critical of Thomas because he doesn't believe what the others say they saw. But we seem to forget that the other disciples also did not believe in the resurrection until they actually saw Jesus. In Mark chapter 16, verses 10 and 11, says, "After Mary Magdalene saw him at the tomb, She went and told those who had been with him as they mourned and wept. And when they heard that he was alive and had been seen by her, they did not believe. And the 2 disciples on the road to Emmaus walked with him a long time before they even realized who he was. Verse 13 says, "They went and told it to the rest, but they did not believe them either." When Jesus showed up in the room where the disciples were gathered, he showed them his hands and side. Then they believed. So they were all slow to believe. What set Thomas apart from the other 10 was not that his doubt was greater, but that his sorrow was greater. It is possible that he was so devastated that he was off somewhere wanting to be alone in his misery. That's probably why he wasn't in the room when Jesus appeared the first time. We all grieve and deal with our tragedies in different ways. Some of us want to be surrounded by loved ones, while others just want to be left alone. There is no right or wrong way. We just don't want to lose sight in our belief that Jesus is with us no matter what we are going through. Let me read that again. We just don't want to lose sight in our belief that Jesus is with us no matter what we are going through. When Jesus appears for the second time, however, Thomas is in the room. No doubt his grief had eased a bit, and he was finally ready to meet with his friends. Once again, verse 26, Jesus came, the doors being shut, and stood in the midst and said, "Peace be with you." No one needed to tell Jesus what Thomas had said, of course. He looked right at Thomas and said, "Put your finger here. See my hands? Reach out your hand and put it in my side. Stop doubting and believe." And what does Thomas say? "My Lord and my God." This becomes the witness of generations to come who have not seen but still come to believe. Thomas went on to become a great evangelist. He took his love for Jesus and the gospel to the people of India. It is said that he was martyred for his faith by being run through with a spear. A fitting end for one whose faith came of age when he saw the spear mark in his master's side, and for one who longed to be reunited with his Lord. I'd be willing to guess that none or very few of you have seen Jesus in the same way that the disciples did in that locked room. Oh, I've heard many testimonies of voices of comfort and direction, people sent to help at just the right time. Shirley was talking about angels this morning, so dreams and visions, miraculous healings, and so many more that we believe are the works of Jesus in our lives. We are blessed because we have not seen, yet still believe. In closing, I'd like to ask you a question. How many of you like to work jigsaw puzzles? Okay. Even if you're not a fan, I'm sure most of you have done a puzzle at least one time in your life. My grandson, Marius, used to love to do puzzles with me. And when we would get close to being finished, he would secretly hide a piece. Of course, I would act all disappointed and keep looking for the missing piece, and all of a sudden, he would just discover he was sitting on it. I think he just wanted to be the person to put the last piece in. You know how that is. If you've gotten to the end of a puzzle and there is a piece missing, Can you still recognize the picture? Sure. But it doesn't seem complete because it isn't complete. Imagine our congregation as a jigsaw puzzle. If one or more of us is missing, we are still a congregation, and we can still be effective in our works and worship, but we are just not complete. Each and every one of us needs to believe that we matter, believe that we are needed, believe that we are loved and God loves us. Believe that God is with us in our darkest times and in our best of times. Believing in the sequoia trees without seeing them will not really change your life. But believing in Jesus without physically seeing him makes all the difference in our lives. So when you're going through difficult times in your life, don't let your faith or belief in the resurrection falter. Hold on tighter, knowing that you are never alone. And as Jesus said to Thomas, stop doubting and believe.